questions on morning session. If you participated and if you just first reaction, what is your opinion on the topic? So, from your side.
My name is Ashraf Talat. I'm a master's student in kvietė, architecture. What else do we need to say more than that?
If you feel that you have to say something on interpretation on the topic.
Okay. Regarding the topic of interpretation, I've been researching it because I had to, also because I'm interested in it in a sense, and I really enjoyed how different each presentation were kind of saying something different, but we're all kind of having kind of the same aim of trying to change things or how we see things. So I'm always trying to restructure what we think of things. And yeah, I do have some remarks about it. That's on the discussion. So
Well, nice to meet you. My name is Nathaniel. We are colleagues. I'm from Nicaragua, Central America. And regardless to the first part of trying to connect everything, because how I can imagine this modernism in Kaunas, and it's related with my topic of my thesis. So I was understanding this decodification. We have an object, and we start to split it in parts. So as a decodification, how the users, that the people, and us as an architect or professional understood this language, and we can take this reinterpretation, because if we know the capacity to decode the modernism as a model, we are not going to be available to enhance at least part of it, because everything is too much, but at least use features that are the most appealing one or the most important one, and enhance it in some ways, and maybe re-engineering of these features. I conclude with everything. Thank you.
I'm Neda. I'm from Iran, Tehran, and I'm studying master in architecture. They don't know college, and I just enjoyed today to a different perspective of each, different perspective of different science, art, or movie, or architecture. It was interesting, and I really liked this. That's it.
I'm Milda. I'm from Kaunas, from here. I'm studying Master of Art Curating in Modernizmas University, and I'm interested in Kaunas Modernism, and I was photographing it and creating photo series of it. So I think I will continue it. So I don't participate in first part today, but I'm always interested in what's happening about modernism.
Hello everybody, I'm Yurate. I'm from Kaunas 2022. I'm the curator of design program, and we together with the Modernism platform probably are the closest friends in this area. By my field, I'm also an art and architecture researcher. So, but this time, I'm sorry, it wasn't possible for me to come to the first session. But I'm really enjoying this interdisciplinary, international way of approaching our kind of a national modernism. I would love to see how it can, cross over the boundaries and mesh with the world. Something like that. So I'm really enjoying and thank you for coming, first of all, and inviting me.
I'm Linas Puleikis. I'm an architect. My office is in Kaunas. Unfortunately, yesterday I have a long party and my lines are killed.
Actually, that was too much.
but I very enjoyed your presentations.
Linas is always in all of our workshops. He's a big supporter and fan of our program. So we are really thankful for it.
My name is Mindaugas, and I'm missed yesterday's party, so more clearly. Far away from architecture. As close as my classmate, he's an architect, so we talk a lot with him. My education is mainly cultural history and anthropology. That's the basis. Later, different things, but that's the basis. And as I was born and grew up here, like just one quarter back from this place. So basically, I feel personally the touch of all this new city architecture, it's modern city. And it happened to be that I just bought the place, just free houses from here in this street. So and now it's the process, because my shoes now are a bit dirty. So the process of construction and everything. So yeah, I have this personal touch with all the topics we talk, and that's why I really enjoyed it. I had a chance to listen to 2 presentations in the morning. So for me, not the ceiling or roof or doors or bricks is important, but mainly people who either live in the building or who design the building. So architects, stories of architects, and what happened, because as you might have heard, majority of architects who started to build this new Kaunas, they did not have a fortune destiny later on. So this is also part of my personal interest.
Are you opening up a public space, or the one that you're refurbishing now and working on?
We will see. I mean, if there is any interest to see how it looks like, we might just go. It's like 5 minutes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
It's a great topic discussion.
I mean, afterwards we might.
Are you invited to the party?
I can grab some drinks, but on the way.
If you are not afraid of dirty shoes.
Yeah, we can talk. Why not? So I come from Novi Sad, Serbia. My name is Stanislav. I finished New Media Arts in Novi Sad and then a master's degree in subversive practices in Belgrade. A group of our friends opened up an independent cultural space in Novi Sad, and it's quite similar to this building. It's one of the last remaining buildings, modernistic buildings in Novi Sad, which is quite an interesting topic, what we're today developing in a sense. And I also really enjoyed the variety of the mediums you went all through regarding this one topic, which is kind of the heritage and the idea of how actually to approach it. So whether it is big data or through interpretation through visual arts or through some terminology and idea where the tendencies are, I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion.
So our presenters are well known and we read their biographies, studied in Google before, so there is no.
Which can be confusing.
But sometimes if you let people to introduce themselves, they are maybe, telling the different story.
Reinventing themselves, like we not.
The other side of me.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe let's try to be, for a short period, to be more serious, if it's possible. And my question comes to all of you, for presenters, and maybe one of the few corner questions I have. And later, I hope that everything will come with questions, but Mendo was just mentioning the community, and of course one of my key ideas and questions is about just can artistic and your activities, can it be considered as a kind of glue for the community to make it more aware about modernism, more involved, more, I don't know, active in preserving and enjoying and etc. What do you see the role of artists in this process? Because how it's if we see official process of cultural heritage preservation, so institution gives a title, this is a cultural heritage, and gives you regulations, and that's it. And of course, I think it's very like conflict way, it's top-down approach, and you are allowed or not allowed, that's it. And what is your like ideas on this, on like the role of art, how it would contribute to this process? Actually, it's for all of you. Maybe Aideen could start, but it's not necessary.
I think the role of the artist, well, my role, not every artist, but is to democratize that ownership of history. And I think it was really interesting hearing you mention about the 20 minutes, sorry, pardon, the 20% that disappeared from here, the invisibility of that, those craftspeople, those architects, the people who were less fortunate and ended up in gulags or in concentration camps.
Or just elsewhere,
or had to leave and emigrate. Those things, I think that's a very interesting, unique position here, and I think if that voice can be given a space, because that's the othered voice. That's the one that I identify as the othered voice in some way. Also the people who were moved in to these buildings and then moved out again, I think they are also othered voices, and it would be very interesting to see how they are empowered to feel a sense of ownership of these spaces. That would be my way of thinking about the role within this interpretation of modernism. But that's just, I mean, that's my thing, my shtick.
For me, it's important to have a more natural, familiar connection to these buildings, and also see these buildings as a source of inspiration, like we have seen this morning with the Polish design scene, who have decided, as Poland was considered to be a grey, dark country from outside and sometimes from inside, and this new generation 10 years ago, they decided to to put their attention to these buildings where they used to live when they were kids, and they have this affection and these links to these buildings, and they noticed suddenly that these buildings were made by Polish architects, not only Russian architects, and that they were very good level, international level, and they used them to reconsider themselves, and they are very proud of this. So they went deep, and then they changed the perception of their vision of Polish design. They suddenly noticed that they had iconic designers, that they could be proud of it, and they put it in value, and it became a source of inspiration and of creativity. And it's not nostalgic and retro what is happening in Poland. It's really creativity. It's that the equivalent of Jaime Ayon in Poland, like Marina Konopacka, they are creating a new design based on modernism, and they have still many things to say. So this is something.
So it's about continuity, as you mentioned. About this. I'm not an artist, so I cannot tell. I'm a political scientist by training in office, working in Central Europe, among other things. But I have been also collaborating with a design agency in Belgium for many years, dealing with cooperation techniques and building projects with people. So I basically believe that what is at stake is creativity, and not art in general, because art is one of the ways to express this creativity, and artists have part of the ownership of this creativity, but not all. People living in the buildings can have part of the creativity. People not living in the buildings, but living in Kaunas, can own part of the creativity and contribute to building a common narrative, visual, artistic, or design narrative around this patrimony. And what we are doing together, not only working but living in a modernist UNESCO listed place, with 1,000 people inside and 70,000 people coming from outside each year is interpretation on a daily basis and how you create this emotional engagement with people. Design being one of the channels, art a very close one, and co-design, which is not the outcome, the object, or the book, or the poster, or the ceramics you create, but the process is as much important as the outcome. So, yeah, I think, I mean, the question is whether we can contribute to bound people. I believe that from our practice we can. I think that all people here can, in a way, and we can discuss how.
Well, I think from my practice, you know, there's a very direct connection actually with providing people with tools to engage into re-evaluating what they have around. So I think that's kind of at the core of what we do. And I think it's actually a very relevant aspect in this context, you know, to give people tools. Because I think, you know, what many times happens is that, you know, some people might be more or less aware of where they live or whether, you know, this is a valuable monument or not. But I think many times people also don't know what to do with it, or don't know how to express it, or don't know what can be done in order to, you know, communicate this idea further. So I think from our practice and perspective, by, you know, these mapping practices we do, we actually provide people with direct tools that empowers them into, you know, be able to tell a story that is personal, so they also feel valued and heard. And we actually fetch from these very personal stories into, you know, conceptualizing them further and then creating artistic concepts around it.
And do you have a kind of experience how these subjective maps of value correspond to the official maps of cultural values and cultural heritage?
Well, that's an interesting point, and somehow not where we like to necessarily put the focus, you know, because I think, you know, official maps is something you can find in the archives of the city. So actually what we intend is basically to create personal maps, and I think that is a much more current narrative and is much more relevant and representative of nowadays reality. And that's also our motivation, you know, to go through this practice of mapping. Yeah, it connects directly with the nowadays reality. So it also allows you to shed light into future things, and it also allows you to reflect on past things.
Yes, I'd also like to add that the role of artists is probably crucial here. I mean, it's still artists makes us look at wonderful things in every way, and this is very relevant in architecture, I think, because it surrounds us every day, it's a part of our everyday lives. It can be very mundane, and sometimes we don't even notice the buildings. So having artists sort of draw attention to that can make us see it in a different way, and that's where everything starts, I think. It brings a new attitude, and then the residents of the city are almost forced to look at it in a new way. And also trying to come up with new creative solutions and everything to use it already. So I think this is an issue with Kaunas as well, but I feel like modernism is so much more appreciated now. And it's closely linked to these initiatives and these happenings and, of course, creativity.
Some other ideas on question before coming to how, but is it relevant, the interpretation? Do you have some other comments on this?
Regarding the sticking community to
To be official?
Yes.
Policies, let's say policies.
That's adding another dimension to this preservation practice, because my idea is if you talk about preservations, just preservation is not enough. You should go some work forever, but how to do and where it's all.
It shouldn't be the style. It should be like you mentioned, like a strategy. Like we should not think about the new, bringing the new style in Kaunas. We should just thinking about how we are going to change everything little by little, and not suddenly at the one moment during the times. And during this time, we should think about a reaction of the people, bring the idea, and for example, put in the website and get the reaction of the people. Do they like it or not, or something like that? And this is make the process, and we can evaluate all the process during the year. This is my statement.
I mean, I think it's important to critically question things. You know, so there might be a set of policies, but I think it's very important to. I think art or creativity or design can play a very important role in subverting this established order. You know. So, but it can be done in such subtle ways that, you know, it really can become a true inspiration for citizens.
Yeah, but it's not invasive in that sense.
Exactly.
And then again, you mentioned the importance of the process, and you also did that. But I kind of had this idea that the idea of the importance of the process just came about, you know, at the end of the 20th century, like from the 80s, from conceptual art and forward, and before we didn't have the idea of the process of futurism or the process of Bauhaus in that sense that we have, but today that we rethink every step of the whole you know, road that we want to go through from an idea to kind of a certain finished product. So maybe just as a side note, where do you see the importance of that process when we talk about, you know, heritage?
Yeah, to be clear, in this case, I mean, you can, our idea, we'll start from our idea because we have an agenda here. We have an hidden agenda which is not so hidden. Imagine we go for an artistic residence in 2021. What we should suggest at first sight to do is to, we are not designers ourselves, so we will be people doing this intermediation work, which we do every day, bringing designers we work with to provide insight, people who will identify or co-identify with locals in Lithuania, and in Kaunas in particular, and people living or working in modernist buildings in Kaunas and having nothing to do with this part of creation normally. And providing insight from outside, as we did a little bit this morning as an introduction, that we can provide tons of insights from what has been done elsewhere, not to reproduce it because it must be vernacular and local. It has to be singular, yeah. But to provide, yes, inspiration, feed for soup, and then we will provide a process as well, a bit in the sense of that we can combine with Hugo, because there is a lot of compatibility, which is based on the experience of the people living and working there. And also on the experience of Lithuanian artists, visual graphists, designers, on what they think make the specificity of Lithuanian design or maybe of regional design here in Kaunas. Nothing to do again with modernism. So nothing to do with art on one side, nothing to do with modernism in particular in one or the other, but we bring the modernist part and this correlation and try to co-conceive together